the most recent Crimean crisis was started by several anti-government protests against the ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. It escalated to a Russian takeover of the Crimean Peninsula in southern Ukraine. Both anti-government and pro-government protests began to take place in major cities on the Crimean Peninsula. This resulted in a hostile takeover of government buildings and the parliament of the Crimean Peninsula by pro-Russian forces. This led to the unconstitutional forming of a new Crimean parliament and the appointment of Sergei Aksyonov as Prime Minister of Crimea on the 27th of February. His party only held 3 of the 100 seats in the Crimean parliament. In the early days of the pro-Russian takeover, unidentified uniformed soldiers took control over airports on the Crimean Peninsula. By the 27th, Russian soldiers had seized control over most of the peninsula. They were surrounding Ukrainian military bases around the peninsula. The claimed purpose behind Putin's invasion of Crimea was the protection of ethnic Russians who made up about 60% of the country's population, who were being suppressed and threatened by the new government in Kyiv. Currently, there had not been any fatalities yet in Russia's military invasion, as both sides were showing restraint. There were rumors of an ultimatum given to the Ukrainian soldiers in the region to lay down their arms by 5 a.m. Kyiv time on March the 4th, but the date passed and no action had been taken. Although Moscow denies any such ultimatum, the Ukrainian government claimed that it was a Russian scare tactic to frighten the largely outnumbered Ukrainian army. Ukraine's response was that the Ukrainian government stated that the new parliament and the Prime Minister of Crimea was an unconstitutional one that was formed by force and not democratic methods. They criticized the Russian government for interfering and provoking conflict, and there was talk about sealing the Ukraine-Russian border. On the 1st of March, the Ukrainian government put their army on full alert and called up the reserve army. With tensions high, the Ukrainian army showed restraint against Russian forces that surrounded their bases and stated that they'd fight until the end. Recruitment offices all around Ukraine have seen massive amounts of people of all ages showing up to enlist into the army to fight for their country. The former Ukrainian president, Kravchuk, vowed to take up arms to defend his homeland, and the government warned of a Russian army buildup near the border of eastern Ukraine. They didn't rule out the possibility of another invasion into the eastern regions. The Ukrainian government appealed to the international community to help out against Russian aggression. The interim Prime Minister, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, said nobody will give Crimea away. Supporters of both sides protested on the Crimean Peninsula. Russia's response was to disperse their army into Crimea Peninsula and claim that they were protecting ethnic Russians and Russian citizens in the region. They called the new government neo-Nazi and fascist extremist. And they claimed the new government was illegitimate. State-owned media by Russia was caught spreading propaganda to the people of Russia and the world. And Russia's decision to send troops into Crimea was a clear violation of the treaty that was agreed on to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and refrain from threatening or using force against Ukraine in 1994. The international response was basically a global condemnation from most Western countries and the European Union.